reactions to the presentation of the mid-year budget by the Finance Minister, Ken Ofori Atta. In his speech, he said more than 160,000 direct and indirect jobs have been created, especially for the youth who've been mobilized to establish agro-processing factories in 58 districts as part of the One District, One Factory initiative. Let's hear from the Finance Minister.
And the school feeding program. The 2023 budget, for example, doubled the benefits under the LEAP program as well as boosted the allocations to the school feeding program. 3, strong and ambitious structural reforms in tax policy, revenue administration, public financial management, financial sector, as well as strong measures to enhance revenue mobilization and address weaknesses in the energy and cocoa sectors. Both are critical to bring public finances back on sustainable path while creating fiscal space for critical development spending. 4, to bring inflation under control through prudent monetary policy, including appropriate monetary policy tightening and the elimination of monetary financing of the budget. Containing inflation pressures requires coordination between fiscal and monetary policies. 5, to rebuild international reserve buffers to 3 months of import by the end of the program. The Bank of Ghana is pursuing enhanced flexible exchange rate policies to help rebuild international reserves. 6, to restore sustainability and preserve financial stability following the domestic debt exchange program to support private investments and growth. And 7, to pursue reforms to encourage private investments, strengthen growth, and create more jobs. Mr. Speaker, it is instructive to note that our path towards securing an approved IMF-supported program has been characterized by speed and resoluteness. More specifically, the following key and significant milestones were accomplished. We achieved staff-level agreement in December 2022, 6 months after we formally requested for the IMF support to back our PCPEG. We were supported by China's agreement to co-chair Ghana's Paris Club Official Creditor Committee. We secured financing assurances for the Official Credit Committee, co-chaired by China and France on 12 May 2023, 5 months after our formal request in December 2022. We secured an IMF board approval on 17 May 2023, 5 months after the SLA and 10 months after a formal request for a fund program. We also secured IMF financing equivalent to 3 times Ghana's quota. We front-loaded disbursement of IMF resources with 40% in 2023 and the rest to be spread between 2024 and 2026, and successfully concluded a domestic exchange program. The results are clear. We are witnessing the catalytic impact of crowding in other resources. We are in discussions with the World Bank for a 900 million development policy operation and emergency support. The United States, through the International Development Finance Corporation, has announced a program to invest $300 million towards the construction of a data center under the G7 Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Investments.
So those were highlights of the Finance Minister's presentation, and I know a lot of you have things to say about what you heard, and we've been sampling some of those on myjoyonline.com, for example. We have reactions on social media. But joining me this morning is Associate Professor of Finance at the University of Ghana Business School, Professor Lord Mensah. But before I bring him, let me welcome the Deputy Finance Minister, Mr. John Kuma, who is here to respond to some of your concerns and the reactions that we've been getting after that particular presentation. It's a pleasure to have you here. I'm grateful that you can make time. Before we delve into the mid-year budget proper, there was reason for me to ask one of my panelists yesterday when we were discussing the expectations prior to the minister's presentation, what he made of the habit, if I may put it, of having the mid-year budget and even the budget readings postponed. So you're told it's happening today and then you're hearing the next day, or even the time. It sends mixed signals. And for Mr. Seth Tepe, he believes it's an issue of confidence and preparedness. But what exactly is the problem? Why do we never have the finance minister say, I'm coming to Parliament at this time on this day, and have it as it is? Because right now the mood is, we know it will happen again, they'll postpone it.
Oh, no. Yes. Unfortunately, the finance minister or ministry doesn't control Parliament's calendar and business schedules. So the finance ministry has been ready right from the middle of this month. And there were some clash of programs in Parliament. And the speaker took the final decisions. You can have your schedule to come before Parliament, but the final decision rests with the speaker. So
all the other times we've seen this, are you saying that it was because there was a clash of parliamentary
on this particular
programs?
instance, it was a parliamentary decision, not the finance ministry decision.
On the second occasion, because this was the third scheduled date. There was one, it was changed, and then the speaker came in and said it wasn't going to be possible on the day that the finance ministry wanted it, and so shifted it to yesterday.
Yes.
Yeah, so
that's what I'm saying. It's subject to Parliament's availability, so you can propose. But we have been ready from the middle of the month, as enjoined by the PFM Act. The finance ministry has been ready. But of course, Parliament must also be ready. And remember, we are rising on Thursday. So there are a number of activities that have to be done, and you needed clearance from the speaker. So that has nothing to do with
So this is specific to this this particular one, and not
I don't know about the previous ones. Because whatever schedule you have, we have our timelines by law, and so we are always ready to deliver.
Right.
But it's subject to Parliament's giving you the clearance to come.
Okay. Now, let us start talking about the reactions to the mid-year budget review.
Okay.
And I want us to be as simplistic as we can, because many of our audience talk about how, we are always talking over the head. So let's just go right to what the people want. COVID levy, for example, was very topical. In fact, yesterday, Dr. Saad actually said that he would wish that the COVID levy be scrapped. He's not the only person. Many have said, what's the relevance anyway? We've de-escalated COVID worldwide. Even here in Ghana, we have, relaxed even on the protocols and all that as a result of the WHO's de-escalation of it. Why do we still have a COVID levy? What are you using the monies for?
Okay, so COVID levy, yes, many people have said COVID is no longer with us. Unfortunately, the damnable consequences of COVID are still with us, especially in our fiscal space. In 2020, we had a fiscal gap of a revenue shortfall of about 12 billion Ghana cedis, and expenditure, extra unbudgeted expenditure of about 14 billion, which amounted to about 26 billion in the fiscal gap. All that money was made up or were replaced with loans that we took from our development partners and other sources. Now we need to be able to recover some of these losses. And then also it created so many associated economic challenges for our country. And remember, the COVID levy also had an expiry date in 2024. So that will be next year. So maybe I will just say, encourage people that we should wait till the expiry of the...
We should hold on for some time.
We should hold on for some time, because the impact of the COVID cannot be immediately gone like that. We have to be a little bit patient. And as a nation, we can all take a decision on whether we want to scrap it or rename it and redirect its purpose or whatever we want to do. Of course, Parliament will make that decision.
What about the special import levies? We heard from the Guta president, who said he would wish that that was also scrapped.
Guta was one of the stakeholders we engaged on this mid-year, and they raised some issues. Of course, some of the issues that Guta raised could not be reflected in the mid-year budget, but we are very confident that in the main budget, some of the suggestions that came up can be looked at. But, and even some of the measures we are talking about just started implementation in May. And so you don't have the full picture to do proper analysis of the impact of the measures. So we believe that by November, when we are doing the main budget, depending on how the analysis have gone, we could take a decision on one thing or the other.
I'll come back to you. We've been joined by Professor Lord Mensah, Associate Professor of Finance at the University of Ghana Business School. It's a real pleasure to have you here, Prof. Grateful that you can make time to join us. Your initial assessment of what you heard presented by the Finance Minister yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, clearly it's a budget that one way or the other seem to align with the PCPEC as he indicated in the review. But then there are some, critical issues that we may have to look at. If you look at the revenue side, there seemed to be improvement, and to the extent what was being targeted, we're looking at 64.7 billion, and he was able to make around 59.3, which is a good signal. I mean, on the revenue side. But then when you come to the expenditure side, you could see clearly that we are not doing well at all. If you target around 92.9 billion and you are making around 68.5, you question yourself, I mean, should you go ahead to lay out, project upon project, which in the end, you could see the commitment levels that we had before COVID for the special, programs, or should I say
the flagship
programs of the government. You don't see any revision in that regard. One of the fascinating one is the Agenda 111. Agenda 111, if per my numbers that I checked, each hospital is costing us around 16 million US dollars, and for which, if you split it, about 12 million is going into the infrastructure, and then 4 million into the equipment that will staff the hospital to make it a complete hospital. So, and if you multiply this 16 million by 101, you're getting around almost 2 billion US dollars, and you ask yourself, where are we going to get this money? Taking into consideration, the inflows from the petroleum revenue receipt, which is the only dollar, inflow, one of the dollar inflows we have, and then other exports that we do. And then having in mind how the way we have been, priced out from the international market, you ask yourself, how are we going to generate, these monies and to finance this long-term kind of investment? And from the review, the finance minister has indicated that we have about 83 of them being active, projects with across all the 16 regions. And I'm asking myself, now that your financing sources have been reduced to short-term financing source, how are you going to finance this project? And this is kind of something that we may have to question. The source of finance for that kind of, project that the finance minister has listed. Now, let me come back to, the numbers that were channeled, that, propose a signal that the economy is doing well or not. I'm looking at the interest rate, looking at inflation, and then exchange rate. Clearly, if you look at the exchange rate, I would say that the stability we are enjoying is more or less kind of a temporal one, in the sense that, the full-scale demand for, dollar is not, on the market yet. The reason why I'm saying the full-scale demand for the dollar is not on the market is that, if you talk about the agents that demand the dollar, we have the government, we have businesses, we have the individuals who are also in need of the dollars. But then the biggest demander of the dollar is the government. And for some time now, government has suspended its, dollar, debt service. I'm talking about the external debt service. It's under negotiations. And so we can see the full-scale demand for the dollar, which is going to determine the price when government starts servicing its external debt. So as we speak now, what is happening, it is kind of numerical stability, but the reality, if I should say, put it into economic stability, we are yet to see that. And let's give ourselves after the negotiations on the external, debt. I'm looking at the interest rates, that has been coming down. The question now is it significant enough, to bring, source cost of funds down? If it's not significant enough, it brings cost of funds down, then obviously, me and you, or maybe any other business person, can walk to the banking hall and then possibly borrow. And if, he wants to use it for business, he can use that, through that possibly employ one or two people to work with. But that impact is not there yet. And so I'm looking at, the economic impact of the reduction. So I'm tempted to say that we are seeing numerical, reduction or numerical achievement, which is a good signal. But, economically, it hasn't started making impact yet.
Reflecting, right.
On the heat of inflation, I can say, yes, we've seen some numerical reductions, but still, economically, people's investment, real value of investment, is still negative, in a sense that when you invest, and possibly if it's in treasury bills, they are giving you around 30%, and inflation is hovering around 40%, you still have some, 10% to cover in terms of the real value. So until inflation is reduced to be at par with interest rate structures, there's no way we can say economically we have achieved something. But I see them to be numerical achievement, which gives a good signal that, of course, we're doing well in a direction of bringing
Prof,
those numbers.
Give me a few minutes to get a reaction. Thankfully, we have the Deputy Finance Minister here, and much later I will be asking you, or I'll be finding out from you, what you make of the Finance Minister's projections of inflation and the others by the end of the year. But Mr. Kumar, a few questions to answer. Yeah. And again, I'm going to reference that conversation we had on the AM show prior to the presentation. There were concerns about funding of projects, which Prof has also highlighted, and halting these projects because of where we find ourselves. Why didn't we consider that, and where are we getting the money from to continue with these projects?
Yes, so Prof talked about a number of things on revenue, which I agree with him. Revenue is doing well, especially on the non-oil side. We had GRA exceeding its target by about $1 billion, but we had shortfall of about $1 billion in the oil revenue side because of the downward trend in crude prices on the world market from $85, which we used in our budget, to about $72, $74 currently. And then also the volumes of production also tipped down.
But interestingly, fuel is increased just this morning. But you can proceed with
Well, of course, that market always goes up and down, so we should be used to that. And then on the issue of expenditures, of course, he says we are not doing well, but I agree with him to a large extent, because if he factors in the negotiation with labor, which resulted in 30% increment in wages, of course, that shot out every government, and we had already done the budget and factored about 20%. So when we agreed with labor for 30%, and obviously you are going beyond your budgetary expenditure considerations. So I want him to factor that. And you see, sometimes we exaggerate the impact of flagship programs on government expenditures. For me, those are not the major issues. The budgetary nature of our budget, or the nature of our budget, is more of rigidity constrained kind of budget. Issues to do with your compensation, interest payments, the statutory payments. Those are the big ticket items that tend to create bigger problems for government in terms of its expenditures. So Agenda 111, yes, that's a good point to make about if it is possible to scale down. But we can obviously carry it out in phases, looking at its importance.
But where are we getting the money from to do that?
Government has various sources of raising financing for Agenda 111. At the moment, we are using the GIF to raise extra financing to support government. I mean, the Ghana Infrastructure Investment Fund. So it's going to be more of out of budget kind of financing arrangement, so that they will be able to raise extra financing to support the Agenda 111. So that is being handled by the GIF by government. On the other issues of projects that have halted, because of the domestic debt exchange and the suspension of the external payments, many project financing from abroad halted. And so we've seen some of them, gradually, a lot of them are resuming work. And by the time we restore the credit lines, all the major external funded projects will also resume. The issue of exchange rate, inflation, and interest rate. Of course, I agree with him on some of the issues he raised. Of course, inflation, if you have inflation at 54% in December, and it is now tapered down to 42.5, it is not to the level that we want, but there's clear turnaround or turn in the corner as we talk about. If you have exchange rate, the T-bill rate went as high as 35%, and now we are talking about 23, 24%. So even though we are not in the single digits yet or the tens levels yet, but we still believe there is a marked improvement and it can be better. On the issue of the exchange rate, it also shot up to 15 cedis to $1 in December. And today, if we are talking about 10 to 11 cedis to $1, we have also seen some improvement in the exchange rate front. So yes, even the ordinary person, and he's talking about, is it reflecting in the ordinary person?
And that's a big question for many people, right?
Remember that fuel, let's use fuel price for instance, shot up to 24 cedis per liter. Today, it's come down to about, even with the increase, I don't know if it's up to 12 cedis yet. So clearly, we are going to begin to see a lot of downward.
But sorry, I have to interject. But you see, while fuel may have gone down, you're now paying more for electricity and water. So it's almost like you get a little relief here, but you're having to pay for it on the other side. So people generally don't feel that sense of relief. The minister is so positive about. I'm sorry, I'd have to rush you because we're just wrapping up a bit. So, Prof, quickly, your impressions about the projections by the finance minister on what the end of year is going to look like for us, and he appears to be very positive. A lot of people find that quite interesting. As I said earlier, we've been sampling views on social media. And the other thing I'd like you to take a quick bite at is because Dr. Kumar referenced that the domestic debt exchange program, we've seen how the Bank of Ghana has been badly hit. We've had experts even concerned about the bank's own expenditure. Some have referred to it as reckless. Generally, on all fronts, we appear to be in a big mess.
Yeah, of course. Once the economy is in dip, it is expected that everything will be showing that signal. But then I would say that Bank of Ghana, I can say they seem to be part of this problem. They can't run away from it in a sense that they control the monetary aspect of our economic space, and then government does the fiscal, and we have been drumming of, the two, working hand in hand. And you see, Bank of Ghana financing of government, deficit over the past, few, months, clearly will reflect on its, balance sheet. You shouldn't have, been surprised about this. And then also, when you take the various banks and the way, the debt exchange affected them, and Bank of Ghana's assets is accumulation of, all those banks, assets and then the liabilities that they have accumulated. So whatever will happen at the banking level, obviously will build up into Bank of Ghana's, balance sheet. So I'm not surprised at all. But then you're looking at a situation where we can say that, yes, indeed, Bank of Ghana seems to have what we call operational autonomy. But when it comes to governance autonomy, our constitution never, supported that. The constitution more or less, seemed to have the executive control on the Bank of Ghana because of the way, the governor is appointed and the way and manner the deputies, and also in some cases it has extended to directorship at the BOG. So effectively, it seems to be like the control of the executive, on the Bank of Ghana, and any environment where you have such kind of appointment based through the executive to the banking, to the regulator, you don't get the regulator being effective. And so I'm not surprised at what is happening on the ground. Just that, I mean, previous governors upon governors have been silent on that, and they seem to show a signal of, working independent. But I can tell you, with the structures that we have in this country, where the governor is appointed by the executive, it will be difficult to control inflation. It will be difficult to control money supply from the Bank of Ghana to the government. To some extent, the first IMF that we went to, we had a condition of the Bank of Ghana financing government expected revenue for a particular fiscal year up to 5%. But this time in the current, PC program, we get 0%, which in itself is more or less a punishment, because there's no way the government will not seek financing from Bank of Ghana because of the maybe possible, lags and delays in taxes and all those that comes, before the end of the fiscal year. So obviously that financing will be needed. But now, because of the indiscipline and all those, as a result of, that relationship between, the government and then the Bank of Ghana, we seem to be punished on that. And I think it's something that we may have to relook at, going forward. So from where I sit, Bank of Ghana's condition, I'm not surprised at all. And then again, when was the last time Bank of Ghana made an advert that they are looking for someone? They're advertising for employment. Nobody knows. So I'm not saying they don't have the expert. They have the expert there. But, they're too opaque, in some of their dealings. And you ask yourself what at all is going on there, So there are so many things we may have to look at, because until we come out to see, the way they operate and the way they do their things, the system will still pose that kind of macro risk, to us. And I can go on to say that it will be difficult to control some of these indicators in the long term. And look, in economics, when we are looking at, a particular variable, we don't look at it in short term. I can pick inflation and trace it back in the years. And you come to realize that the last time we recorded this kind of high inflation was somewhere in the late 90s to 2000. And by that time, we all knew the situation. We're transiting from, military to what do we call it, a democratic, government. So it's not something that we're expecting to be repeating itself. So that has thrown us, off board. And right. I can tell you, until we open up on the BOG's activities, there's no way we can have, the economy running as expected.
And Prof, finally, in a minute, if you can, your reactions to the projections by the finance minister on how the year is going to end.
Yes, it has been revised. I can see the growth rate has been revised to 1.5, which makes sense. There we foresee some kind of risk ahead of us. One of the main risks is a resumption of government, debt service. Externally, after the negotiations, it will reduce government funds availability. And then, looking at the way interest rate has soared up, I don't think government can continue to borrow in the short term to do long-term activities, because it will keep that yield curve. When I say yield curve, the rates related to their maturities, and you can see the short term is on the higher side compared to long term, and there's no way you can manage an economy for more than 4 years with this kind of yield curve. Because all investments have been short horizon. So it dims the revision, but I think I go for the revision. But then next time, realistic target needs to be set for the year.
Okay, talking about realistic targets, Dr. Kumar, your government has been accused a lot of times for not listening to the experts. Classic example is when government was advised to go to the IMF quite early enough, and we heard the finance minister and your response to that, and the confidence with which you said we were not going to the IMF. My question to you is, when do we expect to see great strides in terms of recovery? And do you really have a grasp on this? Is this government really in control? And I ask this because of my preamble. We say one thing today, we do the next thing the other. We say something today, we are revising. Like Prof said, realistic targets. Is this government being realistic? Are we being truthful to ourselves? is the minister and the finance ministry living in a different world than what Ghanaians feel and experience?
Well, yes, we are very realistic. We listen to experts, but in economics, if you have 10 economists, you're going to have 10 expert advice, or even sometimes 12.
But sorry to interject, but my interaction with the experts over time is they largely seem to be pointing to a certain direction most of the time.
So that is it. We are not bound to agree on every matter. On the issue of the debate about going to IMF or not, we believe that we could try other alternatives, like when we introduced the yield levy in the debate. You remember me saying forcefully that we were not prepared to go to the IMF today or tomorrow because we thought the alternative should be considered. And why? That argument will not change. Going to an IMF gives you a short-term breathing space to think in the long term. And then it will still come back to us as a people to have responsibility to address the long-term financing problems of our country. So a lot still depends on us.
Are you in control?
We are in firm control, and so far every indication shows that we are pointing to the right direction. On the issues of the targeting, yes, we targeted 2.5% growth for the year, which has been revised downwards, but the first quarter growth announcement as published by the Ghana Statistical Service is 4.2. So you cannot be spot on when it comes to estimates and projections. You could get it wrong, you could get it right. So the estimation is that we may slow down in the course of the year. But when we did projection for 2.5, the 2.8, the first quarter growth rate actually is 4.2. So we were not outside the growth projection when we projected 2.8, except that going forward, we are anticipating to see more slow growth. But we have also provided for it in the media that we are going to have private sector-backed growth strategies to ensure that we don't slow down the economy.
Thank you very much for your time this morning. Dr. John Kumah is Deputy Minister of Finance, and we'll be staying in touch with him. But let's move on now and talk about what's happening in Niger. We need to pay a lot of attention to that, as we've been told by the experts. Burkina Faso and Mali say they will regard any military intervention in Niger as a declaration of war on them. This action has been backed by the junta in Guinea. On Sunday, the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, threatened to use force to reinstate Niger's elected president, Mohamed Bazoum. Mr. Bazoum was deposed in a coup on Wednesday, but Burkina Faso and Mali say they will come to the defense of their eastern neighbor should this happen. Joining us to deliberate on this is Mataru Mumuni Mukhtar. He's Executive Director at the West Africa Center for Counterterrorism. Grateful to have you here this morning. And there's quite some interesting developments we are seeing in Niger. But this was predicted. We heard some, analysts talk about this. Dr. Vladimir Intridanso, we heard from Professor Kwesi Enin on Newsfile some time ago, talk about the likelihood of this happening in Niger now. It's in our faces. But the dynamics are more interesting when you look at where Niger is and the fact that they are bordered by countries that have similar stories. Let's look at the impact of this generally on the sub-region and for us as Ghanaians.
Hello, yes, good morning to you and good morning to your viewers and listeners. Yes, what is happening now, it's a worrying development for all of us. It should concern everyone in West Africa, everyone in Africa, and globally in terms of global security and global politics. Like you mentioned, a couple of years ago when this started happening in Mali, Mali and in Burkina Faso, a lot of us were very concerned that this could be very contagious in terms of its capacity to affect other very vulnerable countries within the region. And where we are in the last 3 years, having about 6 coup situations happening within just 3 years, this is a very, very poor record on our part in terms of our ability to sustain democracy and good governance. We are not out of the woods yet because there are several other vulnerable states within the sub-region. And if you look at it, of course, I have made this point several times, that it's a function or a product of dysfunctional governance or dysfunctional leadership within this space. And it's because if you look at these countries, the 4 countries that have had these school situations, all of them, they do very, very poorly when it comes to governance, when it comes to economic opportunities for young people, when it comes to the provision of social amenities. And that's why they rank very low on the Human Development Index. And so these things we need to watch out very carefully in terms of our ability to sustain democracy.
Right. So the bigger challenge we have now is the threat from Burkina Faso and Mali. And even talking about Mali, ECOWAS has tried to intervene. We had our own president make attempts at returning the country to democratic rule. We still haven't made any headway yet. But these countries are warning ECOWAS not to carry out its threat of, forcefully removing the military there because they'll see it as a signal of war. What should ECOWAS posturing be now?
Anyone who is familiar with these kinds of situations and ECOWAS's record in terms of dealing with this will tell you that, it's a very difficult situation for ECOWAS. And I actually appreciate this, the difficulty that ECOWAS finds itself. In the last 3 years, we've had similar opportunities for ECOWAS to act in ways that shows that they are an effective regional body capable of restoring order and capable of ensuring that we do not have situations like this from happening. And they failed to do that. And that's why we continue to have that happen. I think that is a very difficult situation. And I have very, very little hope of ECOWAS's chances of having any meaningful intervention or impact in what is going on. And it's because, the options just do not exist for the kind of thing that ECOWAS wants to do. I think that they had a huge opportunity several, maybe decades ago in terms of preparing preemptive and proactive measures to deal with governance issues and to deal with things like this. So we needed to have a kind of index or a matrix that maps out the vulnerabilities in all these countries within the South region. And before you get to this point, we would have known that these were the vulnerable countries and these were countries that were sliding into situations of coups. And that can allow for preemptive action or measures to be taken. And while we do not have that, this is what we have. This is the reality of coups happening. And to have ECOWAS threaten, and they haven't been doing that in all the 4 situations, threatening all kinds of actions, using sanctions, embargoes, punitive measures, seeking to deter the military leaders from acting the way they want to do. And that has not been able to deter them. And they've never been able to have any military situation reversed. And 2 days ago, what we had, it's a huge, error in my estimation, because it's a big departure from what they have done in the last 3 situations. They are asking these military leaders to stand down. Other than that, they are going to intervene in a military way. You do not have that. You would not have that, because if you notice how the negotiations went, went with the former military establishment in Niger, between them and the presidential guard, it was the same situation, asking them to stand down and threatening that they could be, taken down if they do not willingly stand down. And if you understand the implications of a failed coup, you would make sure that it succeeds. You just make sure that the coup that you undertake succeeds, or else you do not attempt at all. And so based on that analogy, they refuse to stand down and actually threaten, to go at all, length to make sure that the coup succeeds. And because they wanted to spare or avoid bloodshed and instability in Niger, the military had to give in. The same way, the military leadership in Niger would be doing all the calculations and all the arithmetics, and they would come to the conclusion that they would not succumb to the, to the demands of ECOWAS. They would not, stand down, because that would mean, a dire situation for them. And so I don't see that happening. And if ECOWAS chooses to really actually intervene militarily, it would be a huge blunder. It would undermine the security of Niger. And would undermine
We have to leave it here. That's Mutaru Mumuni Mukhtar, Executive Director of WACCE, talking about the coup in Niger and all the implications attached. You watch a news desk with me, Bernice Abubedulam. So when I come back, I'll be speaking to a woman who's given voice to many other women and championed the cause of gender balance for 15 years. You want to stay for that. I watched her as a young girl, and I told her when it comes to hair, I'm always a little girl because I put myself in that state of mind all the time, watching her read the news on GTV. She went on later to start her own show, and for 15 solid years, she's been doing this. It's such a massive feat, one that should not be ever underestimated. She's an achiever, she's an inspirer, and she's an old student of my school.
Obranyo Warabo.
And I'm happy to be associated with her. I'm speaking to Gifty Auntie this morning. The standpoint at 15.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Let me start this way. When did you conceptualize this? And how did you start bringing it to life?
Okay, thank you very much. And it's a privilege to have you interview me. This is the first time, you interview. So I'm really excited about that. It started when I came back after my master's in 2006. I came back, you know how when after school, you're all gingered and energetic and how you want to cause change. And I was privileged to have a feminist, Christabel Kane, who was the first female anchor for BBC World, to be my journalism lecturer for my master's in international journalism. And she wanted me to stay to be her TA, and I said, no, I had to come back. And then she made me promise that when I come back, I'm going to be a voice for not just Ghanaian women, but women across Africa, because she was married to a Ugandan and she had traveled Africa and knew some of the challenges. I came back, I tried to force that, and it wasn't working. So somebody actually made a comment, well, if you are interested, so much interested, go and start your own show. And I took it World Cup. So I started preparing, and then 2008, I decided to actualize it, to let it come to life. And the program was birthed.
And it's been 15 years.
15 years.
How have you sustained this for 15 years? As a media person, I know and I understand the challenges. And, to even constantly hold your viewers for that long, that in itself is such a chore.
Yeah.
How have you done it?
That's what I call a blessing, Simply grace of God. You just have to make sure, I believe that where God leads or guides, he provides.
Right.
You need to believe in what you're doing. I mean, after the first, even when I was starting, I remember a minister then made a comment that the name Standpoint is too hard, so we need to get a softer name for it, and then it won't fly. People said that, doing a show to talk about issues affecting women will not be willing. I mean, we had all that. But by the grace of God, I've always believed in this. The feedback has always kept me going. I always make sure that every year there's something new, something dynamic about the show that will keep people glued to it. This year, to mark the 15th anniversary, the first program we did was rededicate the studio and dedicated a new set.
Okay.
We built a new set, changed everything to give it a new outlook. Personally, it gives you a kind of new energy.
Right.
I love red anyway, so give you new. Nice. So it renews your mind psychologically, and then for your viewers as well. So every time I'm doing something new, changing the dynamic, changing the narrative. So, and I am somebody who's also social media very active. So I use social media to really push it, to really push yourself. Yeah.
You're so inspired. And I know I've been seeing the testimonies, people writing about what an inspiration you are. But here's what you've decided to do, which for me is so exciting. You've decided to put all your emotions, your thoughts, your life, your learnings, your mistakes, everything into books for us to read, and even for future generations to. How did you start writing? And I can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
6.
Six
Yes.
books. Wow.
So, a bit of me was the first one. I started a segment of the show. As I said, every year I want to change something. So about 6 years ago, I started a new segment called A Bit of Me. It's like my opinion, my take, as you know, Samson Ladi Ayeni calls it, my take on issues. And in 2009, I had an accident. It broke my ankle, and I was nearly pushed to depression. But then somebody was sending a general broadcast, and it was about one of my videos encouraging people never to stop, to keep going, irrespective, regardless of, and it encouraged me. It just woke me up. So I just told myself, listen, for years, people have been telling me to write. If I write a book, this is there, you have it. Anytime you are going through something, you remember that, listen, let me encourage myself. It's not every time you get somebody to encourage you. If I hadn't received that video, videos will get lost, audios may be corrupted, but books, unless it gets bent, will always be there. So that's what started my journey. And within 4 years, I'm about to release my 7th book.
Tell us about it, The Black Chalewote. What's
The Black Chalewote it talks about the crazy life of mothers, you know.
Tell me about it.
The crazy life. One day I was actually rushing, taking my little girl to school, and in the middle of the motorway, I realized that I was wearing black Chalewote. I didn't have a spare shoe in the car. I didn't have any spare shoes in the office. And I had meetings that day. I had no choice than to put myself together to drop her off at school. I get to the office, and then my staff tell me that actually the dress I was wearing, I turned it inside out. And I dropped her at school, interacted with parents and everything. I didn't know what I was doing. So I wrote about it on Facebook. And Reverend Alberto Kran said, Gift, you know what? I think you must write this book,
Yes.
The Black Chalewote. So this Black Chalewote talks about my journey with her, but we go deeper into issues of fertility, infertility, challenges of the options, you know, the traumas that you have to go through, IVF, misconceptions about IVF, traumas of failed IVF, challenges of professional women raising children, challenges of late bloomers like me. You know, sometimes you go with your, I'm 53, my little girl is now going to be 6 years. And you're always calculating, so by the time I'm 60, she's now 13. She's this. You go to places where sometimes people say, oh, your granddaughter. You know, but people like me, I can handle it. I'll definitely I tell my story, but not everybody can handle it. I remember years ago, somebody even made a comment before I even thought I could have a child. Somebody made a comment, I think you should discuss, you know, challenge of late bloomers, because it's not easy. It's not easy. So it talks about all these issues. And of course, there's a lot of laughter in the, you know, the funny things. They carry the fears of even carrying pregnancy to term and all that. So that's what the book.
We will be looking out for this book, and it's to commemorate the Standpoint at 15. You can follow Hiniyeri Gifty Auntie on social media and follow the Standpoint. There's so many things that have to be done to celebrate this, but this is all time will allow me. But I promise you, we will do a proper sit down and have conversations, because I'm interested about this.
But
about the details of the
can
book.
you chip in that on 23rd of August, we are having an international conference to mark the Standpoint at 15 at La Palm Royal Beach. Lema Roberta Gbowi, the 2011 Nobel Peace Prize recipient, is our keynote speaker. It's at 9 a.m. It's open to all. And then
La Palm Royal Beach, 23rd
August. And then 9th of September, we are going to Gomoa Fete to feed about 150 pregnant women. You know, so please, anybody who wants to come on board should, you know, call 0543 618182. 0543 618182. Thank you.
A lot of love from my heart to yours.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hiniyeri Gifty Auntie, for all that you do. Like I said, we need to do a proper review of that book and a couple others that she's written. And we'll take a quick breather here on News Desk. We'll be back with more. Thank you for staying. It's been a real pleasure bringing you News Desk today, sitting in for your regular Aisha Ibrahim. Thanks for your company. There's more news when you log on to myjoyonline.com. Bring you business news during the midday news. Once again, thanks for joining me. I'm Bernice Abubedulam. So stay with us. We are your most credible news source.